NFL fans, sports bettors, Survivor fanatics, how are you doing today? My name's Tony Farmer. I'm here with my co-host Ryan Hoag. We're hoping you're as excited as we are to talk about the NFL season and specifically about Survivor contest. Ryan, how's your day going so far, brother?
Hey, I'm in the middle of a casino in Nevada, so it's never a bad day when you're at a casino. So I'm from my hotel room, coming to you, exclusive content from the world's gambling headquarters.
I love it. And I'll be joining you out there for week one. I can't wait to get out there in Vegas. I'm in Texas right now for people who don't know me. But as I said, we're really excited to talk about this. This is our first show. So we'll start off the top with a little bit of intro about who we are in case you don't know who we are and kind of the approach that we'll take for the rest of these episodes. We plan on doing one of these a week every Tuesday night during the NFL season. We'll have one more next week that'll kind of preview week one. But don't worry, we'll get into a little bit of week one Survivor tonight as well, because I know some of you are chomping at the bit looking at that interesting week one card. But as I said, I'm excited about the pairing of Ryan and I here because I've got a sports betting background. Ryan played in the NFL. He was drafted in 2003 by the Raiders. Played for, let me know if I forgot anybody here, Ryan, but the Giants, the Redskins, the Vikings, and the Raiders, of course. Did I get them all?
Jaguars.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So Ryan is a veteran of those teams. And I love talking to Ryan during the football season as a bettor because Ryan can give me some insight that only a former player can give. So, for instance, I've talked to him about injuries, injuries that he's actually played through. And it gives me an idea of, can this injury be reoccurring? Ryan has also played for several coaches who are in the league right now, Jim Harbaugh, Stefanski, guys like that. And that gives you an idea of the scheme and how these guys run their teams and things like that. And that's a great help for a sports bettor. So combined with my analytic approach, my background in sports betting, and Ryan's on the field experience, I think we have a pretty good team here that'll help you as you're going through this Survivor season. Ryan, did I miss anything there?
Yeah, you forgot your obsession with this. And it actually excites me because just Survivor pools in general, I'm a big fan of, whether it's NCAA tournament for the men's bracket or NFL. You and I have both had a lot of success. I won it 2 years ago, and you were right in the mix for the multi-million-dollar prize last year. But what I'm most impressed with, and half jealous and half like roll my eyes at, is how obsessed you are. And the fact that, one just needs to look behind you and understand that, like, that's the middle of your bedroom, that you have every single game laid out, and you have started mapping out like your trail of how you're going to end up, as the last man standing in this Survivor pool. And we'll talk about different approaches and why I think that's a little ridiculous, but hats off to you, because I have definitely learned that you are more prepared than anybody. And that can be a detriment, certainly, to, at some times, but I love that you're on top of it. You've been going at it since May, right when the NFL came out with the schedule. You kind of started mapping out, who you like week one versus week three versus, hey, you got to leave this team for the Thanksgiving and Christmas games and things like that. So I'm excited to have that playful banter back and forth.
Yeah, I own it. I'm absolutely obsessed with Survivor. And the contest that Ryan was referring to with millions of dollars on the line was, of course, Circa Survivor. And last year was a $9.267 million prize pool. And it was the second year out of the last 3 years that I tied for the top 40, 31st and 38th. I was tied those 2 years. And last year that was out of 9,000 people. So made a really good run. Hopefully with 10 entries this year, we'll do a little better. Ryan's planning on having one entry in Circa Survivor, which, by the way, means our strategies are going to be a lot different from someone who has 10 entries and someone who has one. And I think that's good for the listeners out there to hear our different approaches. And so once again, I'm really excited. I think we're going to play off each other really well here, Ryan. I talked about that whole multi-entry strategy and your more single entry strategy approach. Can you talk a little bit about how that can kind of shape your approach as the season goes on, just having one entry and kind of maybe feeling naked at times?
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, the only Survivors I've ever played at in our one entry. And so I really embrace the fact that it's a one and done. And like I said, 2 years ago, I won my survivor pool and with pretty significant money on the line, which I was happy with. It's the ultimate survival in advance. I think that's why there's such a adoration for the NCAA men's basketball tournament and women's, especially as we saw last year. But, this one and done format, if you don't show up that week, that game, you're done. And I love the fact that, there's so many different strategies out there for, you can just go by the Vegas line and take the biggest line. But ultimately, and again, we'll get into a lot of this, but I feel like week one is the hardest week in Survivor because you have so little to go off of, right? I mean, teams play, the preseason completely different than they're going to play the regular season. Some teams play their starters. When they do play their starters, it's a very vanilla game plan. You don't know, like, is there a team like Detroit that's going to surprise everybody? Is there a team that's just going to be decimated with injuries like the Chargers have the last 4 years, despite having a very, very talented roster?
Not to mention rookies, new head coaches. Those are just kind of curveballs and wild cards thrown in the mix as well.
Yeah, and then injuries, and how do guys step up in those roles, or how do they play injured or coming off of an injury? So that week one, and that's why I don't necessarily understand why you put so much emphasis starting in May. And we have had this conversation before where I'm like, Tony, why are you putting, agonizing hour after hour after hour? Because really, until this coming up week after Labor Day, that's going to start, right? We just had the final cuts today. Now the rubber starts hitting the road, and now you start seeing, okay, this is the depth chart, right? This guy got suspended for 6 games, Jordan Addison for the Vikings. That changes things, right? Now they don't have as many weapons. TJ Hawkinson now on IR or PUP, missing the first 4 games. That changes things, right? Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk, they're contract holdouts, right? Are they going to play? Are they not? So again, like, why have this mapped out thing when you don't know? There's so many wild cards up until right before week one. So I usually wait right until the last minute before I make any decisions when it comes to Survivor. And then once week 1 or week 2 finishes, then I start believing in your chess-like approach where now I have to look big picture. And I'm starting to think about, okay, I need to leave 3 teams for those Thanksgiving days, so I have a little wiggle room. Now I have to leave 2 games or 2 teams that I feel good about for those Christmas Day games, assuming I continue on. But those first couple weeks, man, it is about surviving and advancing and picking a team that you feel great about and not getting really fancy of, well, I don't think I'm going to end up using this team ever again. Well, guess what? If it's a coin flip week 1, stay away. And I know that we might have a difference of opinion because I think your week 1 pick this week is ridiculous.
We'll get there at the end of the show. So defending my position a little bit, I love that we're getting into this disagreement here because I do take a very different approach. And one, I'll defend it by saying I can't help myself. I don't have any other way. I get so excited about this. I have to put that energy somewhere, Ryan. I've got no choice. But I also don't get stuck. I don't make a path in May and get stuck in it and say, this is the way, this is what I'm going to do. It's constantly changing. So as this news comes out, you mentioned some things, Ayuk and Trent Williams and Addison getting suspended. Every time news like that comes out, I'm constantly adjusting and looking at it and going back. Now, I recognize it's not the most efficient approach. I recognize for, someone that has a very stressful life, there's people out there working 3 jobs and working 70 hours a week. My approach does not work for that person. But for me, it suits me. And what I think it does, it helps me kind of get ahead of things. So when this news does break, I don't have to start from scratch. I can make these little adjustments. And I've already got an idea of, I know this team's got a easy end of the schedule. For instance, off the top of my head, I already know that the Atlanta Falcons last 4 weeks of the season play 4 of the expected worst teams in the NFL. So I already know that going into it, that the Falcons are probably going to be a team that I want to save for later. I already know that the Bills play the Patriots 2 of the last 3 weeks of the regular season. So now as this data and this information comes forward, it's just a matter of kind of making these little tweaks. And I've got paths for like, hey, if the Panthers end up being good, I've got a separate path for if the Panthers look like garbage like they did last season, 2 or 3 weeks into the season. And I'll crumple it up. If all of a sudden Bryce Young comes out and has 3 straight 300-yard games, I'll crumple that up. And yeah, I wasted some time making it, but I feel like I'm completely prepared. And having that data, having that information helps me feel prepared and a little bit less stressed during the season. But as you can attest, because you've watched games with me, that stress level is still there during the season. I want to share one story real quick, Ryan, because it hits on what I talked about to start the show about your knowledge. It was week 12 last year. We were watching a game together in Vegas, and I needed the Steelers to win in week 12. They were up by 9, and was it the Bengals kicked a field goal, and they go to get an onside kick with 2 minutes left, down 6 now. So if they recover the onside kick with 2 minutes left, they can absolutely win this game.
2 minutes and 5 seconds. 2 minutes and 5 seconds left.
Yes. Like plenty of time. So I'm sweating this out because I desperately want to advance to week 13 in Survivor. There was a huge knockout on Thanksgiving. So we're down to like a couple hundred people left. I wanted this bad. And I'm sweating out this onside kick. And I'm pacing around the sportsbook area that we were watching this. And Ryan looks over to me and he goes, hey, I played for Danny Smith. He's the Steelers special teams coach. Something to the effect of there's not many better special teams coaches in the league. This guy has great attention to detail. Yes. At least you said something like, I guarantee nobody on this field is going to make a stupid mistake because he's so good with attention to detail. And it put me at ease. I swear my blood pressure went down when you said that. And sure enough,
what happened was not only did the Steelers recover the onside kick, they didn't go down right away. They waited 6 seconds, so it'd be below 2 minutes, 1:59, so they could kneel it out. Big time play. Danny Smith, his attention to detail, second to none, best special teams coach in the NFL. Good memory and good fun thing. But to recap for our listeners out there, Last Man Standing, this is our podcast. We're doing Survivor. Why you should listen to us. We got Tony with years of experience as a sports handicapper. We both worked together for OddsShark. And I played in the NFL. I played professional football for 9 years. I was in 6 NFL camps for 5 different teams. We have a really, really unique perspective, especially going back and forth. We don't always agree, and that's what's the beauty of it. And
I'd say we usually disagree. Is that fair? I feel like we actually disagree more than we agree, which is the beauty of it. Because if someone's always agreeing with you, you're not growing, you're not learning, you're just in an echo chamber at that point, you know?
Yeah, you don't listen to me sometimes, and that's why you lose. So
that's completely fair. You don't listen to me sometimes either. That's completely fair.
I had the opportunity to win Tony $250,000 last year, and he did not listen to me. And we will talk about his lack of listening to me, of selling. When he had the opportunity, he didn't, and he ended up with as much money as I ended up with last year.
That's not true. I monetized to the end. Don't forget that part. But yeah, it's a great dynamic. And sometimes I don't listen to Ryan. Sometimes he doesn't listen to me. And you, the listeners, can decide if you want to listen to Ryan and I, whether we're agreeing or not. But what I think kind of makes this show unique, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to lay out your options every week. And we're not just going to talk about who is more likely to win these games, but we're also going to talk about those teams' paths going forward. Because you may have a team that's really likely to win, but strategically, you want to save them for week 10 or week 14 or something like that. So we're going to go over all of that. We're going to kind of poke holes, devil's advocate style, almost like a defense lawyer in each of these arguments. Even if we like the path, we're going to poke holes in each of these teams so that you can hear the counter arguments, digest them, and then make up your own mind. Of course, we're going to discuss strategy at a micro level, at a macro level, and then later on, we'll talk about hedging, monetizing your position, selling your entries. There's avenues to do that now if you're in Circa Survivor, which is very exciting. And whether you're in a small Survivor pool for $50 or $100 in your family or office pool, or you're in the Circa Survivor $10 million guaranteed contest, I think there's something for everybody in this show that you guys will enjoy. Ryan, should we jump into? Go ahead.
Well, speaking of playing defense lawyer, and I love that comment that you just made. like you said something earlier regarding, I can't remember which team, but you said they play Atlanta. You said they play their last 4 games are against 4 of the projected weakest teams. Again, like I just think that thinking right there, we have no idea. Last year, we didn't know until week 1 that the New York Giants, who were coming off a divisional or a wild card weekend win against the Vikings, and then they went to the divisional and lost. We thought they were going to be a pretty solid team. You watch them week 1, they lost 40 rip to Dallas. Everybody knew that the New York Giants were going to be horrible because they gave up, I think, 9 sacks.
That was
they
an ugly
looked
game.
like they had no business being on the same field.
Yeah.
And then week 2, I think they played the San Francisco and got blown at again. So be cautious of wanting to keep a team. Like if Atlanta was the odds-on betting favorite, I would tell people if that's who you love this week, especially week 1, go for Atlanta. Don't worry about Tony's strategy of waiting till week 4. We don't know that Carolina and New Orleans and whoever you might think is going to be a bad team. We don't know that. The NFL is so beautiful because every single year it's parity. And you have a shot. And yes, it's definitely quarterback driven. And that's why the multiple MVPs, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, that's why they're the 1 and 2 seed each year. The most talented rosters like San Francisco ends up but outside of those like 3 teams that are pretty consistent. I mean, I saw this the other day and I thought it was fascinating growing up a Minnesota Vikings fan, right? Tony, maybe tell me in the top 5 all-time winning franchise as far as winning percentages. Give me a few of those who you automatically think, okay, that team for sure.
All time. So in their history.
Yep, in the Super Bowl era.
Well, did you just give the Vikings away? You said you thought it was fascinating as a Vikings fan. So that it was either, but I wouldn't think of them. I'd have to go Packers.
They're number 8.
Okay.
7. Sorry, they're number 7. And their winning percentage is .552. Just so, again, they're number 7 and they're barely 500. Right? Again, this parity is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Dallas has got
Dallas is number 1. They're just under 60%. Then and they have 5 championships.
San Francisco, or do those terrible years before the 80s hurt them? Probably.
San Francisco's number 8.
Gotcha.
Pittsburgh 59% with 6 championships. Baltimore, obviously a shorter span, but they're 3rd with 57%, and they have 2 championships. Minnesota, 4th place with 56%, no championships. Then you got the Patriots after them, and so on, right? You don't hear about the Kansas City Chiefs. Some of these, the fact that the Vikings are ahead of the Patriots.
That's wild.
15 years of Tom Brady. Like, how is that? Like, that blows my mind, and no championship. So all I was
if I didn't have your clue that you gave me, because you gave a little teaser by saying as a Minnesota Vikings fan growing up, I probably wouldn't have guessed the Vikings in the top 10 or 15 guesses. I honestly wouldn't have, because you don't think of them as a playoff team, but I guess they haven't had that many like really bad seasons either. They're often kind of middle of the road, right? Like I can't remember them having a 1st round pick anytime recently, at least. So I guess it kind of makes sense when you think of it that way.
So I say that I bring that up to say that, even the best team of all time, allegedly since the Super Bowl era, at least percentage wise, the Cowboys under 60% winning percentage. Every single team has a shot. That's why the fans are so into it. Obviously, first month of the season, everybody believes that their team could turn around. Would you be shocked if Carolina somehow snuck into the wild card? I wouldn't. Like a new coach, you just never know these things. So again, that week 1 is so hard, and it's so telling, though. I think moving forward, be cautious saving a team because before week 1 or even after week 1, I would say until week 3, a team you start feeling really good about. Okay, Giants sucked last year; they have no offensive line and they can't recover from that. That's not going to change suddenly. Your quarterback goes down. Aaron Rodgers last year for the Jets, right? I had a bet for the Jets to win the Super Bowl. Great odds. and I felt great about it. And then, Aaron Rodgers on the fourth play of his NFL Jets career goes down. Their season's right. So just be cautious.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And where I agree with you, I do think you have to be a little more conservative early in the season. I think you have to be a lot more conservative early in the season, and I think you have to be a little more conservative and still focus on planning ahead. Because I don't know if this has happened to you, but I've been in survivor pools where you're alive at the end when I first started playing them, and you have nobody left, and that is a bad feeling. When you are relying on a 2-point dog in week 16 for a lot of money on the line, that's not a lot of fun. So I do think there's a balance there. And hey, going back to what we said earlier about the 10 entries versus 1 entry thing, when you have 10 entries, that's kind of a difference maker, because you have the luxury to be able to take some chances on some teams. Because if, for instance, week 1, you throw a pick on the Browns because you really like the way that game's handicapped, and the Cowboys win, you lose 1 entry, it's not the end of the world. It stinks. It's going to hurt, but it's not the end of the world, and you're able to do that. The other thing with multiple entries is, let's say you put all 10 on the Bengals. You could be out week 1, and then you're going to be kicking yourself, and that happens every freaking year. So,
and that's something I want to pick your brain on moving forward, and probably not today, but when you have multiple entries, like, how beneficial is it to, diversify? And when you diversify, if that's in fact, to your point, not going all Bengals, like, how many do you want to do 10 separate entries? Then you got to be 10 for 10, which you might as well go do a 10 team parlay for $1 in Vegas, right? And you're going to win your ROI is going to be way better. We all know how difficult
it's fascinating, and it's something that I don't think is talked a lot about on these Survivor shows, because when you have 10 entries, you can power rank them, right, Ryan? Like, you can say, this is my best entry because I've used the worst teams on it. So, okay, you have a really good entry that's better than the rest. So next week, do you want to put a safer one to save your really good entry and make sure it survives? Or do you want to take another chance with that really good entry and make it a really, really good entry, so it's like one of the best ones in the field, and it's sort of power ranked best out of everyone in the field? So there's so much of like nurturing these entries as you go, and so much like micro strategy within the bigger strategy. I think that's part of what makes Circus Survivor so fun, for sure.
And I think that having a plan, both you and I have a plan. Like, I know for me, if I get to a certain point in the Circus Survivor pool, I am absolutely happy to sell. You were not last year. You wanted all 9.654321 million. And I was like, Tony, you are just getting too greedy. And I kept imploring you. And then you would maybe win one more week, and you'd be like, see, if I would have sold for 75,000, I wouldn't be in.
Well, yeah, you leave that part out of the story. You like to talk about the part where if I had sold at the very end, it would have been about 200,000 in equity, in money, excuse me. But there was, I don't know how many weeks before, 5 weeks before.
No. Two times. The time I was with you, I said maybe you should sell 1. And then when we got deep, I said, you absolutely should sell 1, if not 2. Look at how much money. If I would have told you, Tony, that your, $8,000 or whatever could turn into 250,000, would you have taken? You were like, absolutely. You're like, no, but I have a path to win it. And I was like, dude, that's the kiss of death. And guess what? Both get knocked out the following week.
And the way they got knocked out, for people out there, I won't spend too much time on this, but I had the Steelers and I had the Jaguars. Both teams lost their starting quarterbacks in the same weekend. And the last game that knocked me out, the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence got hurt in the fourth quarter, and I lost in overtime. So it was a particularly devastating weekend that Ryan loves to remind me about all the time, and he loves to bring it up as often as possible.
It was dumb. Dumb by you.
Like I said, we disagree all the time, and that is part of the fun here. Ryan, are you ready to talk a little week 1 action?
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into it.
And again, we're not going to go through all these games because we still have a show next week, but we'll give you at least some of our early thoughts so far on the week 1 games. And so here you can see these percentages, guys. This is the implied win percentage based off the money lines. A lot of Survivor shows out there They give you the point spreads, and the point spreads mean absolutely nothing. In my opinion, it's lazy to go off of point spreads because Survivor isn't a point spread contest. You can have 2 games with the same money line, with the same point spread, but they have 2 different money lines. Sometimes the point spreads are inflated because of teaser protection and things like that. So really, you want to be going off the implied win percentage. And you can find that by going to websites like OddsShark is a company that I work for. You can go to their website. They've got an implied probability calculator. You punch in the money line, and that is how you get these percentages. By the way, there's a little typo there. If you see Seahawks 69.23%, they're playing the Broncos, by the way, and that game is in Seattle. Ryan, as you look at this, tell me what stands out to you. For me, I'm noticing that all the favorites are home teams. There's not a lot of road favorites.
Yeah, there's those couple neutral games that'll be fascinating. And again, I would stay far away from those. But yeah,
one neutral game, right? Eagles and Packers is neutral. I put them in purple, both of those games, because those are the games before Sunday. And if you're in Circa, you can rebuy. So in other words, if you take the Chiefs and they lose, you're able to rebuy back in before Sunday. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think we just got one international game for week 1.
Yes, that's my fault. And then Tony, just help me out, because the only one I see where it actually differentiates who's the home team is Vikings at Giants. How do I know who is the home team in all the others?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It is the team on the left. If it says at, it's at that place. But there are so many freaking home favorites that it looks like that's not the case.
So the Vikings are the only road favorite.
Correct. And let me throw this out there too. Not only, and I'll bring this up again in a second, but not only are the Vikings the only road favorite, but some sports books very recently, as of a couple of days ago, had them as a dog as well. So I think you can still find a pick on in the market for that game.
Yeah, I thought it was -1. So the one thing that jumps out, if you want to bring that back up really quick, is, I mean, again, we said week 1, what's the goal? Survive and advance, so you can get a feel for how these teams look like, right? Those teams that week 1 and 2, you are just going to be an absolute, football TV rat, because you're going to spend so many hours watching clip after highlight of all the games, reading about the teams, right? Because you don't know a lot going into week 1, right? A lot of teams, and NFL is beautiful in that they do such a good job of playing a poker hand and not like letting you know what they're doing. So the Bengals Patriots, right? For me, like if I'm just going to go, chalk, like that to me seems like the most pragmatic approach. It's the Bengals at home. They have the better quarterback. But again, would I lock my pick in now? Because I don't know who the Patriots starting quarterback is, right? That worries me. They got a first.
Wait, who would you rather it be? If you're betting on the Bengals and Survivor, who would you prefer it to be? Brissett, the veteran, or May with the upside?
I'd rather have it be Brissett. If I'm going to bet on Joe Burrow versus Brissett, just because I feel like I know what I'm going to get with Brissett. He's not going to throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't think he's going to do it. The way the Patriots are made up is they're going to be a very good defensive team. They're going to try to run the ball down your throat. They're going to keep it close and try to win in the kicking game, right? Brissett is that kind of quarterback that's just going to, like, he's not going to lose the game for him, but he's also not going to, like, if they get behind in a team like the Bengals, you can get behind because they have so much offensive firepower. However, is Jamar Chase going to play, right? Is Joe Burrow completely healed from from his season-ending injury last year? Like,
there are some question marks with that game for sure. I would disagree with you though, Ryan. I would actually prefer to go against May. I see your point that there's some unknown upside, and that is a little scary. But I just love Lou Anarumo. I can never say this guy's last name. The defensive coordinator for the Bengals, Lou Anarumo, going up against a rookie quarterback week 1 on the road in the jungle. I think that would be a big, big, big selling point for me to take the Bengals in that game. But let's look at
Tony. Here's the thing, though. Name the last rookie quarterback that Lou Anarumo has gone against.
I'd have to pull up the Bengals schedule last year.
Right.
But
So, I mean, again, it sounds good. What you're saying sounds good. But I mean, unless you give me more data points than just being like, oh, he's a good defensive coordinator against a rookie quarterback, like that doesn't tell me anything. Right. Jamar Chase tells me a lot. Drake May,
that's
again,
huge. That's huge.
I'm not a Drake May fan. Like, I don't think he's great. But again, there's a little fear in me because I don't know what he's going to bring to the table. Right. He might be sneaky athletic and can get like, he can run around that pocket, and you just never know. Maybe he goes and plays the game of his life. Too little data to really feel great about. But again, that's what you have to take a chance somewhere in week one. Like, you're going to be rolling the dice wherever you go, even if, and the one thing that worries me with that game is if you do go along with what the majority of people, I believe, are going to do, right? I mean, 82% chance that the Bengals win, right? Or implied value or predicted value or whatever. If you go opposite that and the Patriots somehow upset, I'm thinking about the Bears a couple years ago against the Bills week one. Everybody got knocked out of the Survivor. I didn't pick that, and I was still around, and I ended up winning the pool that year because I went opposite what everybody else is.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to zig while other people zag, and there's people saying there's probably going to be maybe 50% or more on Cincinnati in this pool. So that is an argument not to take them, because not only do you potentially avoid a landmine if something crazy does happen, Joe Burrow gets hurt in the first quarter, something like that happened to me last year where your quarterback gets hurt. Not only that, but you are now on a different path. So in week 4 or 6, when you decide to use the Bengals at that point, other people aren't going to be on them when you're using them. So it puts you on a different path. And that's the name of the game in Survivor. You want to be on a different path as everybody else. And as I say ad nauseum, and you'll hear me say on this show a lot, you want to zig while other people are zagging. But week 1, people out there listening are saying, hey, you guys are contradicting yourself. You said play it safe. Now you're saying zig while other people zag. That's the beauty of Survivor, is you got to kind of find that balance in your strategy. So we could probably talk about that Bengals-Patriots game all day. And I think listeners will be disappointed if we just talked about the chalk game. So give me another one, Ryan, that you would feel comfortable putting your one entry on in Survivor for week 1.
Yeah, so I'm looking at a lot of these, and I don't feel great about, I mean, honestly, there are so few games that I feel good about. And again, we will get into each game and why you and I feel good or not very good about. And that's the beauty of the NFL. They do such a good job week 1 of making it a really, really interesting matchup. The one I feel most convicted about, and it's going against what I normally feel like, because I do not believe going within a division is a smart thing, because division matchups, they know each other so well. They play each other twice, right? And generally they're 1-score games, and it's a road team. I'm going Texans over Colts. That will be my Survivor pick, barring some changes in the next 12 days before the start of the season. I look at everybody is on the Anthony Richardson bandwagon. I am not. I am fading the Colts. I'm fading him. I think the fact that they almost made the playoffs was large part due to Gardner Minshew saving the season. I looked at their week 1 last year. They got rolled. Week 2, yes, they beat the Houston Texans, but Richardson got hurt in the first half. Minshew came and saved the day, threw a touchdown. And again, that was when Houston was figuring it out. Obviously, Houston finished with a flurry and had an excellent season. Obviously, lost to a really good Baltimore team at the end of the year to knock them out of the playoffs. But I love C.J. Stroud. I think they have the quarterback advantage in this game. I think they have the skill position, right? And they have a shutdown corner in Derek Stingley that matches up really well with Pittman. I think Pittman's negated. Therefore, you got to go all towards Jonathan Taylor. They got the front 7 with Danielle Hunter, right? Will Anderson. I mean, they have all 3 levels on defense. They have studs, and they have playmakers with Stephon Diggs now. Joe Mixon, they didn't have much of a running game last year, at least in that first game against them. Joe Mixon adds that, two-way component, running between the tackles and catching the ball out of the backfield. I love the Texans over the Colts. That will be my survivor pick if I had to pick right now. But like I said, I am not going to do
Lock and
anything
change. Sure.
until like the Thursday when that Baltimore Kansas City game. That's when I'm usually going to make that first pick.
So here's what I agree with. I agree the Texans are a better team than the Colts. No doubt about that. I'm really high on the Texans. In fact, I've got some futures exacta bets with the Texans being in the Super Bowl. So not going to argue with you there. From a strategy standpoint, though, I don't like it because Houston plays on Christmas. It's against the Ravens, who again is a very good team. But I do like the idea of saving Houston because Christmas and Circa, you got 3 games. You've got the Chiefs, Steelers in Pittsburgh. You've got Seattle, Chicago, and then you have that Houston game. So I want to save as many, not all 6, but like 3 or 4, 2 or 3 at the least teams to have for Christmas. I think that's important. The other thing to consider with Houston, week 6, they've got New England. Week 8, they've got Indianapolis again. Weeks 12 and 18, last week of the season, they've got Tennessee. And so there are some good spots to use them during the season. And I like the Texans more than Indianapolis, but let me throw this at you, Ryan. DeMeco Ryans' defense, the weak spot of it has always been a rushing quarterback. And I know that being a 49er fan, they always got torn up when they went up against mobile quarterbacks. You saw Kyler Murray had a really good game rushing against the Texans last year. Lamar Jackson did as well. I mean, he does against everybody, right? He's the MVP. But the Texans in a divisional game against the Colts, who played them tough twice last year. Like you said, it's a division game. The Colts, without Anthony Richardson, played the Texans twice last year. So it gives me pause. I remember you said earlier in the show, be careful if it's week 1 and it's a coin flip. This one isn't that far off of a coin flip. We're just a little over 50%, a little under 60% at 57.45. With 1 entry, I think that's a really bad idea, honestly. With 1, but with 10 entries or 5, I could see sprinkling 1 or 2 on there if you really like the game. But I think that's really risky for week 1 for 1 entry.
Hey, I don't disagree that it's risky, but again, I think one could make an argument that every one of those games is risky.
Yeah.
And Matt Burke is the defensive coordinator for the Texans, not DeMeco Ryans, and so. It's not
the influence. DeMeco Ryans sure. Has a lot of influence on that defense for sure.
But it's not his defense, right? It's not his defense. And they saw Richardson last year. They were one of 2 teams to actually play against Richardson, right? And what I've read from the preseason scrimmages and the game, like Richardson, if you make him throw the ball, like he's a run first guy. They know that. They're going to make him have to beat you with his arm. And again, with Stingley being a shutdown corner, I just don't think they have the weapons on the outside, and they're not going to be able to score 30 points. I love the Texans, and I feel even more convicted, especially that you don't think they're going to I feel more convicted just because of what you said.
So you want to fade me week 1. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
I like it. So
who do you love, Tony? Who do you love?
Well, I got to give this a little caveat here.
Oh, my, of course you do.
I don't love this team, but I love them situationally. You ready? So we're going to pull this up again, and you and I agree that there's a lot of potential landmines here, and we don't love any of these games. So let me ask you this, Ryan. Because week 1 is so scary, you and I agree on that. We don't have a lot of data. Week 1 is the toughest week, and this week 1 is particularly daunting. Why not go with one of those 4 teams in the purple down there in Circa? Because in Circa, if you lose, you can rebuy back in. It's expensive, but if you have the bankroll for it, you can rebuy back in and basically have a second life. So I like the idea of going with the Eagles. I'm not going to take the Chiefs week 1 because they're playing on 2 different holidays in Circa. I'm not going to take the Ravens because there's plenty of opportunities to use the Ravens earlier in the year. I like the Eagles over the Packers week 1 in that Friday game. Because if it loses, if I put 2 or 3 entries on the Eagles and it loses, I can rebuy back in. No harm done. Just a couple bucks. Decent amount of money. But if it wins, Ryan, Now I can strategize totally differently for Sunday, can't I? Because now I've got 3 in the bank. So if I did want to put the other 7 on the Bengals, for instance, I can feel more brave doing that because I've got 3 home already.
Okay.
So
Tony.
from a perspective of putting 3 on the Eagles, if they win, I can now change my strategy for Sunday. If it loses, I rebuy. Strategically, no harm done, harm to the wallet, but strategically, no harm done. And yeah, there's a couple opportunities to use the Eagles later in the season. They play the Panthers. Of course, they play the Giants twice. They play Washington twice. But the value of getting a get out of jail free card before that Sunday, I think is absolutely huge and can't be overstated. And I'll throw this out there too. I would not be taking the Eagles without this get out of jail free card. This is the main motivating factor. I do like the matchup, though. I do think the Packers are a little overrated, and I think that the Eagles are a little underrated. Nick Sirianni's 3-0 week 1, always has his team ready for week 1 games. I remember 2 years ago when the Packers went to London and were 8 or 9 point favorites against the Giants and ended up getting smoked in that game. Another international travel game. So I've got some questions about this team, preparation-wise, etc. I like Sirianni enough week 1 with the get-out-of-jail-free card in my pocket strategically to put an entry or 2 or 3 on the Eagles here in this spot. What do you think? Well, I know what you think because you were shaking your head. But halfway through, you stopped shaking your head. So you either got exhausted or I got through to you. I'm not sure which. Tell me.
Here's what I'm thinking about, right? They're playing in Brazil, right? If you've heard the protocols they have for the NFL teams while they're there are ridiculous. Like, I mean, you can't leave your hotel and all these things. I'm thinking about discipline. Which team is more disciplined? That's going to be, not have a Buchanan. Remember Buchanan for the Falcons the night before the Super Bowl? He got caught soliciting prostitution and against that was the Falcons and the Broncos. Anyways, I'm thinking about the Packers. Those guys Matt LaFleur has those guys so disciplined, so locked in. Do you think Nick Sirianni has a pulse and he doesn't have that team locked in when it comes to discipline? You're playing in an international game. Now, there will be NFL protocols that you just have to adhere to, I get, but I'm thinking about, right, it's a unique situation. You have guys that are just and then I think about the fact that James Bradbury, right, he's not going to be a part of that Eagles organization. That means they have one corner, Darius Slay, and then I think they got Gardner Johnson back, right? So they have two guys. They have 2 guys in the secondary, right? Last time I checked, the Packers have 4 really, really good receivers, right? And I know A.J. Dillon's out now for the year, and that's a big blow, but Josh Jacobs is a capable workhorse. They got 4 really good receivers, a quarterback, and a system that they've all played in and gets the ball out. Worst case scenario, it's a shootout, and it's going to be close, whereas I don't think Anthony Richardson has the promise to bring him back, right? I mean, Jordan Love's always going to be able to bring that team back to make it at least close. I am staying so far away from that. Would be like my 15th game that I would put money on.
Wow. Of the 16th. Well, with that in mind, you and I should have a side bet after we get off air. We'll agree to terms on that game because we are miles apart.
You can take the Colts and the Eagles, and I'll take the Packers and the Texans, and we'll bet a significant amount of money.
Well, we might end up tying in that case. We'll talk about the terms afterwards. But I really like the Eagles in that game. But again, the get out of jail free card I think is absolutely huge in that situation. Any other games you want to talk about real quick here? Oh, Ryan, I know real quick before we go, and we're running out of time, so I want to keep this somewhat neat and tidy. Are there any games that you think other people will be on that you want absolutely no part of when you look at this schedule?
Yeah, I look at that Bills Cardinals, and I know it's a 54%, predicted for Bills, but I am not high on the Bills.
73%.
Or what did I say? 74?
You said 54. You were looking at the decimal. You're good.
You're good. 74%. their best defensive player and one of the best defensive players in football, Matt Milano, just tore his biceps, I think, or his chest, tore something, and he's out at least until December. That's a big deal, especially I think he calls the defense. They lost Tre'Davious White to free agency and a number of other guys. They have guys banged up at Oliver on the defensive line. Whether or not he plays is a question mark. And then offensively, obviously, they lost their two starting receivers in Diggs and Gabe Davis. And like, I don't know who Josh Allen's going to throw the ball to. He's got two good tight ends, sure, but you got to be able to stretch the field. And Keon Coleman isn't exactly a burner. He's more of a possession receiver. And so I think teams are going to just play close to the line of scrimmage with a spy on Josh Allen, and he's going to end up trying to do too much. And you saw last year when he tried to do too much, he forced the ball. They lost to the Jets last year without Aaron Rodgers in that week 1. In a gross, like a good defensive team, right? Cardinals aren't necessarily a great defensive team, but they got pieces, and their wins last year were some of the most impressive wins of any team in the NFL. They had better wins than the Kansas City Chiefs, and they had better wins than the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, good point. They beat Dallas, was it week 3, I think, 3 or 4, where they whooped Dallas. Nobody saw that coming.
That took a lot of Survivor people out of there. Yep.
Absolutely. And, I'm with you on this one, Ryan. We can actually end on an agreement because this game here, this Bills-Cardinals game, would terrify me from a Survivor standpoint. Like you said, Josh Allen has a totally new receiving core. The Cardinals' offense is good. I'm going to go on the record and say the Cardinals have a good offense, potentially a top 10 offense with the weapons that they have. Trey McBride, obviously the potential with Marvin Harrison Jr., Wilson is a really good receiver as well. They've got a solid running game as well. The Cardinals, I think, are going to be in a lot of games this year, a lot of shootouts, a lot of high-scoring games. I think they're an over team. And if the Bills' offense isn't clicking, and it might not be because they've got a bunch of new weapons at wide receiver, this could be a scary game for Buffalo. And as I said earlier in the show, the Bills have the Patriots 2 of the last 3 weeks of the season. Weeks 16 and 18, New England versus Buffalo. And so it's a good idea to maybe save them. I know Ryan won't agree with planning that far ahead, but there are plenty of other opportunities to use Buffalo later in the season as well. So we both agree there to stay away from Buffalo week 1. So with all this disagreement in this show, I like that we agree to stay away there. Good stuff. Right on. Yeah. Ryan, this was a lot of fun. We're going to do this again next week. You ready to do a full week 1 breakdown next week?
Hey, last man standing, just like I was for the NFL draft, Mr. Irrelevant. I'm ready for next week.
All right, let's do it. Take care, everybody. We'll see you again next week.